In this video I'm going to be speaking unscripted, sort of extemporaneously about Fallout 4. If you haven't heard of the game, and I don't know how you couldn't have, it is the latest entry in a long-running series of sci-fi RPG games that go back as far as the 1980s with the game Wasteland, set in a post-apocalyptic America, where nuclear fallout and radiation have totally altered the landscape, and a terrible Mad Max or Boy and His Dog-inspired world challenge the player to survive and discover its secrets. The Fallout games are generally considered among the greatest video games ever made, and I'd have to agree with that, especially Fallout 2, and Fallout New Vegas is absolutely amazing. I'm going to be discussing in an itemized form the different sections of the game that I had something to say about, but first I'm going to give you my overall impressions and my background with the series. I first played Fallout 1 when it came out back in the 1990s, and I've played Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. I have not actually played Fallout 3, because when it came out I was deeply skeptical about the changes that Bethesda made to the system. So those are the Fallout I've played: 1, 2, New Vegas, and 4. And I've played them on and off, especially 1 and 2, ever since. I really love the games, and they're some of the best games ever made. Just to give Fallout 4 a ranking, I would put it as probably in third place overall, with Fallout 2 and New Vegas being the gold and silver medalists, respectively, in the Fallout series. Fallout 1 arguably had a better setting and story to it than Fallout 4, but the gameplay in that one was so old and unpleasant, and even compared to Fallout 2, I didn't like Fallout 1's gameplay too much. Anyway, let's get into it. So let's talk about the world of Fallout. This is going to be about the general atmosphere and setting and feeling of the game compared to the other ones. I would have to say that of all the games, this one has the absolute worst atmosphere to it. When you get out of Boston and you see this wasteland, it really doesn't look like a wasteland. It looks just like an average winter in the northeastern United States. I've spent a lot of them here, I know what they look like, and this is basically it. Somehow the empty desert lands of parts of California and the Mojave Wasteland just looked so much better. It was really evocative for the end of the world. This one, it just doesn't feel all that scary. It feels like I'm walking around just anywhere. And furthermore, I don't really think that... I never got a real sensation of fear or dread or terror, or like this is some sort of dark, nightmarish land of the wastes that is just filled with evil and horrible things all around me. I really got more of a feel at times of like a really bad third world country, like that was going through a period of anarchy. It doesn't feel as destructive and exhausted and terrible as a world like in the Mad Max movie. If you watch Mad Max, there are just gruesome scenes of darkness and violence in there that proves that things have spiraled totally out of control. Everything is wild and violent, and there's cruelty abounding everywhere, and it just looks like the world is fatigued and exhausted from having worked itself to death, essentially, trying to create all of the civilization around it. This one doesn't feel all that destroyed. Which brings me to another point, is that, you see, in this version, Boston was not actually hit by a nuclear bomb. A nuclear bomb landed nearby, and it wrought a lot of destruction, and it, killed a lot of people through radiation and fallout, obviously, but the city remains largely intact. So you're wandering around sort of the ruined wastelands of a city, and it feels a lot like the Omega Man, which I actually like. I think that's a good thing, that they've changed things up and made the game feel and look like a different kind of apocalypse than the muddy, grungy, yellow-brownish wasteland of the last couple of games. It just feels better like this somehow. But overall, that's just the style and texture of the buildings and the world we walk around in. The real atmosphere of the game just doesn't feel very dark. It doesn't feel very frightening or scary. In the first couple of Fallout games, they were part of, in the grim darkness of the 1990s, there was only war. There was only violence. Everything was in a style that's sort of mocked nowadays as grimdark, that was sort of brutal and crude and ugly and dirty. And the game doesn't feel dirty somehow. There's too much grass, there's too many trees. The game doesn't feel like there's grit and dirt and slime around it like Fallout 1 and 2 did. Maybe because you're always looking top down at the ground. That had something to do with it, I don't know. But You know, the game just doesn't feel the same kind of darkness that it did in the first couple of games, and that was Fallout 3 in New Vegas, but this game seems especially bad at that. I don't feel like I'm walking around in the horror of the wasteland. I feel like I'm walking around in, you know, like February in the northeastern United States. It feels pretty normal. I think they really should have gone out of their way to make the game a little bit unfriendly and a little bit bloody, and, well, you know, grimdark. You know, I'm from the 1990s. I love that era. I love how it looks, you know, I have a nostalgic fondness for it, and I would have liked to seen it here. Although that's really more the fault of Fallout 3 and New Vegas as well. The world doesn't give off the impression enough that these people have survived a terrible destruction of their civilization and are trying to rebuild from it. The atmosphere aside, the actual level design of the various dungeons and buildings you go into is pretty tight. I like it, I like how it was done, it feels interesting, it feels natural, it feels oftentimes like I'm in a real place, not in a specially designed video game level. It feels like this is a regular world that people were walking around and inhabiting and have sort of bent to their use as these little fortresses of super mutants or raiders. And I never felt that there was any problem with that at all. I thought that the levels themselves were crafted well, and I liked wandering around them and exploring them. A major part of the atmosphere issue has to do with the music. The music in Fallout 4 is kind of the best of times and the worst of times. Building on what I said about grimdark before, this from Fallout 1 and 2 is kind of the music that I expect from a real Fallout game. And yet, there isn't a lot of this music throughout the entire game. At the very beginning of the game, at the title screen, and this is very important for me because it's the first thing I hear when I start the game before I even load my save, is this music. It's this very tough, marching, like, we're gonna go out there and get 'em, kind of yeehaw, Go America, jingoism kind of sound, and it really doesn't match the setting or the game style at all. I hate it. The same can be said of the combat itself, which has the same kind of charging, this is, you know, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare kind of music, and I just hate it. It really doesn't match it. The music from Fallout 1 and 2 was absolutely the best. That kind of scary, ambient, horrifying, freaky music, electronic sounding music from the era of the late 90s sounds so much better. It makes me feel like, whoa, am I a strange wanderer in the wasteland, struggling to survive, barely able to survive against the horrible odds set against me? Or am I a tough warrior sent out to fight the enemy and, you know, oorah, I'm gonna battle everything around me and machine gun everything to death? It really doesn't fit. Having said that, I think they just had that put in the game. They told the composer that they had to do that for these scenes, because the rest of the soundtrack actually sounds magnificent. It is perfect. I don't know this for certain, but it really feels like there's a significant link there between the music in Fallout 4 and the theme song to Stalker, one of the most interesting landscapes that's kind of, it's not a post-apocalyptic movie, but it has kind of the feel of this empty, you know, Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl was based on this wasteland. And it really, really fits and is absolutely amazing and some of the best music that I've heard for any video game in a long time. So I'm not criticizing the composer, I'm just saying that the stuff that he did that sounds right is absolutely amazing. And the stuff that he did that just it does not fit with the setting, you know, yeah, fine, whatever. It's not that it's bad, it's that it doesn't fit right here. As for the music that they play, the licensed songs or the, you know, great American hits songs from the 1940s and 50s that they play, it's alright. It doesn't feel significantly different than the soundtracks from the previous games, and, you know, unfortunately, because it's no longer in the Mojave Wasteland, there's no cowboy music anymore, but I guess that makes sense. It might have been nice to include that a little bit here and there. The person on the radio is horrible. I hate him, which admittedly is part of the game and actually part of a quest that you can get, but still, he sounds horrible. I do like that there's a classical music station that really made me, when I was wandering around sniping people, just getting tons and tons of headshots, make me feel like I was sort of like the Hitman from the Hitman series, just delicately wandering around with this beautiful orchestral music in the background. It really worked. Overall, it's just more of the same at what came before, and I think they really exhausted a lot of the best music that they could find for Fallout 3 and New Vegas, so it doesn't really add a whole lot. The combat in Fallout 4 feels a lot better and a lot more fresh than what came before it in Fallout New Vegas. It is a lot faster, you can play it a lot more without using VATS, without the pause and play. VATS no longer pauses the combat, it slows down the combat, so you can still die even if you go into VATS, so it's not just an automatic way to save yourself. And the VATS defense, especially in survival mode, seems very low. You know, it was a little bit overpowering in New Vegas, but in this one it seems much better. And you can just play the entire game if you want to without using VATS. So I think it's a good thing that they've added in, you know, you can play the game both ways. Regular, stop and play, not pause and play exactly, but slow down and play, or as a normal shooter, and I think that's fine. One of the problems I did have with the combat was with the melee combat. The ability for enemies to block your attacks is overpowering. They seem to always be able to block your attacks, no matter where you attack from. And unlike a normal third-person action game, like Dark Souls or something, it's kind of hard to judge and gauge, even in third person, but especially in first person, where exactly your attack is going to land or strike, and you don't quite know if you're at the right distance to do it. And that is really obnoxious, and it just seems oddly enough that melee, which seems like it would be easier to do without VATS, is actually harder to do without using VATS, because the enemies are just constantly able to smash, to block your attacks. Even an enemy with just like his wrist can block a giant baseball bat with circular saw blades glued onto it. I don't know how that's possible, but he seems able to do that. I can't really explain it. It just seems kind of ridiculous. I think they kind of need to get rid of the ability for enemies to do that. It doesn't work that well, especially if they're not also holding a melee weapon themselves. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially when you're kind of knocked back in the middle of a fight where you're being attacked and shot at all sides in survival mode and can't really live for very long. It kind of encourages you to use VATS a lot more often, especially with this Blitz edition, which allows you to essentially teleport to an enemy's side and attack them really close. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I don't know how the game would work well in Melee without it. I've never done a Melee playthrough without Blitz, and I would balk at the idea. It really doesn't seem possible. What they should have done was somehow make it so maybe when you're running or charging at an enemy, your damage resistance is higher. There are some legendary effect weapons that do that. I don't really know how they could have fixed it, but the way they did it, I don't think worked out very well. Overall, the combat feels a little bit improved, but more or less kind of lateral from New Vegas. There are good things and there are bad things. I don't necessarily feel that this is a huge improvement or a terrible waste of time. It's kind of in the middle for me. The changes to weaponry in Fallout 4 were just amazing. The addition of Borderlands-style gun modding into the game was a brilliant choice. It's so much fun to add on all kinds of upgrades and additional parts, like an advanced calibrated receiver, a stun pack, a comfort grip handle, a marksman stock.
Holster.
Oh yeah.
Bandolier.
Baby.
Silencer.
Mm-hmm.
Loudener. Speed cocker.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
And this is for shooting down police helicopters.
Oh, I don't need anything like that. Yet.
It's much more satisfying to augment your gun than it was in New Vegas, which was really more of a sideline. And it finally gives a damn good reason to pick up all the trash littering the wasteland. You could get some use out of it in New Vegas, but it was nowhere near this. Fallout 4 created an addictive new gameplay system and perfected the use of something pointless from the previous games. Bravo. There's now, you now get excited when you see all of these desk fans and typewriters and things that you can pick up. It's absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, the gun modding has led to a reduction, I think, in the number of weapon types overall in the game, or at least the distinct weapon types in the game. There's no 5.56mm pistol, 9mm, 12.7mm pistol, no Rambo-style light machine gun, etc. and the number of melee weapons has been reduced too. They seem to have been relying on the unique look or functionality of a single gun with a mod to replace the overall number of unique guns. That's clever, but lazy. The combat rifle and combat shotgun look virtually identical. That's not acceptable. It's ridiculous. Even back in Fallout 1 and 2, this was a gun porn kind of game where they had all these amazingly cool-looking weapons that you could get. But in this game, they look so generic. I think they were badly designed overall. The overall number of guns should have stayed the same or increased from New Vegas, with mods for all of them. Maybe I'm just being harsh because I've only played the Game of the Year edition of New Vegas with all the extra stuff in it, but even with extra stuff in Far Harbor and the Mechanist, it's not really enough for me. The biggest problem, the unforgivable sin, is that there is no grenade launcher. Thump Thump and I had a special relationship in New Vegas. We had a bond. We were meant for each other. And now in Fallout 4 there's no goddamn grenade rifle? How am I going to do my Predator roleplay in the Wasteland now? They've also gotten rid of submachine guns because you could put automatic receivers on pistols, essentially turning them into machine pistols. But still, it sucks that they left out some of my favorite guns. Also, automatic rifles have really taken a beating in this game. The weapon called the assault rifle looks horrible. It looks like some kind of weird steampunk monstrosity from BioShock. This weapon belongs in Rapture, not in Fallout. Which brings me to another point, the pipe weapons. Oh my lord, the pipe weapons. I remember once in Fallout 2 there was a pipe rifle you can get early on, but even in that game it was discarded pretty quickly in favor of a 10mm pistol. The pipe pistols look terrible. They're ugly brown sacks of wooden shit. Now to clarify, it makes perfect sense that pipe guns exist in the Fallout universe. They're improvised weaponry made of simple materials like a block of wood and rusted odd bits of metal, sort of like a zip gun or a fancy zip gun. But they look like garbage, and virtually all of them are inferior versions of regular guns like the combat rifle or combat shotgun. There's virtually no point in including them in the game because the 10mm pistol is superior in virtually every way, and you get that at the beginning of the game. If you thoroughly explore Sanctuary in Vault 111, you can find over 150 10mm bullets. That's before you even have your first mission. The pipe weapons are redundant, and that's just if you don't know the game. If you are familiar with the game, better guns can be obtained almost immediately, and you can even occasionally in the first mission, when you get your first pipe weapons, get better guns, like a hunting rifle or a 2-barreled shotgun. And if you really know the game, you've played it before, you can instantly get much better weaponry farther south in the Commonwealth. It's just pointless to have these guns, and they should have spent more time on other guns. It seems like a great idea to include improvised weaponry in the game, but overall it's something that should have been discarded for the cooler-looking guns that I mentioned earlier. Last but not least is a lingering anger about the sound of the gunfire in Fallout 4. It's weak. Now this may be, as I mentioned before, I'm picking nits. Even with the sound turned up nice and loud, and everything else drowned out, I can barely make out the gunfire. In New Vegas, a gunfight sounded, well, like a real gunfight. The weapons made huge explosive crashes and bangs, and you were deafened by the noise. That's a damn gunfight with all the cracks and booms real gunpowder would make. It's just so damn unsatisfying in Fallout 4. Overall, though, I do like quite a bit of the weaponry in the game, and especially some of the heavy weapons like the Fat Man were made much more useful and cool than they were in New Vegas. And I don't have it's not a horrible, terrible problem. It's just a, sort of a weak sauce response. It's a poor, average set of guns, where there should have been an amazingly cool set of guns. It seems to have diminished in quality compared to New Vegas. It seems like they really cheaped out on the overall style and quality of some of the weapons, because they just assumed that your modding would sort of make them unique. But it's just not enough. There needs to be more types of guns. And even if it seems with all the DLC, they don't really do that for me. The armor in Fallout 4 looks pretty damn good. I like that they've changed the system so instead of one single piece of body armor, you can mix and match between sets. That kind of personalization is more important than it seems. Customization of weapons and armor is a major factor in continuing a game for me, because I find a look that really fits for me, and that makes me want to keep playing longer. Another excellent change is ballistic weave. You can add armor effects to your clothing now, further increasing your ability to look however you want. You can waltz down the street in a smart gray suit that still has the stopping power to survive a blast of rifle fire. However, I was pissed that you mysteriously couldn't add it to all clothing. Why can't this sweet helmeted cage armor do that? Why can't I look like I'm wearing a still suit with this Brotherhood of Steel officer's uniform? Why can't I armor it up? It's ridiculous. Having said that, I was annoyed you couldn't paint your armor any way you please. All the combat armor stats start as light green, and you can alter that to a few color options like white and black. But why can't I color it any damn thing that I want? The color of your armor adds an effect to it, such as energy resistance with white or increased stealth with black. But that's where customization should have won out against gameplay. It shouldn't have been much trouble to add a Mario Paint section to the game where you can change the color to whatever you bloody well want. If I want orange power armor with yellow polka dots, it's fashion suicide, but let me have the choice, damn it. You should also be able to spray paint writing on it if you want. Why can't I write Raiders Suck on my armor? And why can't I look like Buzz Lightyear? Or why can't I make my power armor look like my favorite Space Marine chapter? But overall, a lot of the armor looks amazing, like the leather armor, or interesting, like the weird Mad Max-styled Raider armor. It does look like improvised equipment that people would wear to try to get some protection in the wasteland. But combat armor looks, well, often terrible. I know that's very subjective, but just look at it. It doesn't cover enough area on the body. The New Vegas armor looks much better. The same with metal armor. It looks sort of weird and clunky, like you're wearing a gothic medieval breastplate, not like the metal armor in the previous games, which I think looked a lot sleeker and better. Furthermore, the heavy combat armor looks chunky. It reminds me of Smo's armor from Dark Souls. I mean, look at these thunder thighs your character gets if he wears them. All of the armor comes in, or most of the armor comes in 3 different sets: regular, sturdy, and heavy, that you only can get, for the most part, based on your level. The higher your level, the higher level enemies you'll be fighting, and those enemies are more likely to drop sturdy or heavy armor. However, by the time they're starting to drop heavy armor, that's typically much, much later on in the game, easily after you've already beaten the main storyline, before you start getting random drops of heavy combat armor. There are a couple of places to farm the heavy combat armor early on, but that just brings me back to the point about painting it. You see, in order to change or affect heavy armor, you need to have a higher rank in armorer. And in order to do that, you need to have a higher level. And you need to wait until you're level 39 of all things to start modding the heavy armor. That's usually well after you've beaten the damn game that you can start changing the color of it. Or at least reach a point where you can beat the game if you so choose. So until you reach that point, your armor essentially has to be that light green color. You can't make it any cool color like black or white. You really should be able to customize it however you want. Overall, the choice to make your armor pieces rather than one suit of armor is probably for the best and looks really cool. One of the absolute best things they did with the game is power armor. In the previous games, power armor was just a set of armor like anything else. You may have needed special training to use it, but it was just you put it on like regular armor. In this game, power armor is like an armored vehicle that you climb inside. And the way in which you use it is absolutely incredible. You run in there and it's just extraordinary. It's like having your own personal armored personnel carrier just around your body at all times, and it really is just amazing. It transforms the game. It's a totally different type of playthrough that you can use this with, and I absolutely love it. There are so many different types of power armor in the game with so many different looks, like Raider armor, or the basic T-45, or the fancy XO1 power armor, and you can upgrade it and you would make it look all sorts of different ways and do different things, and you can put a jetpack on it in the final section. It's just incredible. They did an extraordinary job with this, and, you know, bravo. They have to be congratulated for that.